What's up, everybody? Welcome to podcast now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk a little bit about Higgs in Death Stranding 2, talk about his character, and talk about where I think maybe he could be going and what they've shared with us so far. So look, this is easily one of the most interesting characters in the first game, a game that, by the way, is just filled with really, really interesting characters. But this has become one of, I think, Troy Baker's more like fun roles, just a character that I think is wild, and it's just become very, very popular in the community, right? I think a lot of people like Higgs, or at least like the performance. I mean, the thing with him as a character is like there is some depth to him. I think in like literally the base game, Death Stranding, right? If you're not reading any log, if you're not doing any like deep lore like kind of looks, he actually isn't that deep of a character, and he's one that doesn't, I think, get as much love as he probably should compared to the rest. You know, they really go on a lot of explanations as to who all these other characters are, and oftentimes a lot of them they're tied to the names, right? Like why they're called a certain thing really connects to their story, you know, in some way. Higgs is just like eccentric. He steals every scene that he's in, right? Like him and Sam make a pretty, even though, you know, Norman Reedus plays Sam a certain way and Sam is supposed to be played a certain way, and you don't normally would think that these two would jive. They do. And I mean, I think Higgs is just a very fun character, and again, I think Troy Baker just has so much fun. Now here's the deal. If you do look into the character, I think there is quite a bit there, and even what the game kind of tells you, right? I mean, this is a man that at least in the recent time, right, he has a whole past of like him as a kid and kind of getting into like how he activated the dooms and how it's actually connected to death. Like this is a guy that has to be around basically bad things going on. If he settles, if he tries to be like a normal person, he loses what makes him, like, I guess, quote unquote special, right? But in terms of the game itself, you know, this is a man who was tricked. This is a man who was with Fragile Express, and Amelie, you know, took a liking to him, and he was kind of like her plaything, right? Like he followed her plan until he didn't, because she would only tell him certain things. He kind of found out the larger goal, and I don't know if you would necessarily say betrayed her, but he wasn't thrilled with her plan with Sam and how these things were going. He wanted the extinction to happen faster than it did, right? Just to kind of give you guys a little bit of background in case you forgot as to Higgs, right? And obviously, you know, he ends the game stranded on the beach. Now, you know, the whole game is really leading to that he's going to be killed, right? Like Fragile wants to kill him, and then ultimately that doesn't even happen. She kind of gives him the option of just remaining on this beach, kind of like in a purgatory type thing. But obviously he's found his way back, and here we are now into Death Stranding 2. Now, here's the deal, okay? With a Kojima game, I feel like it's very, very difficult to predict, like, very specifically, you know, where these characters are going. I kind of want to give just some broader, you know, ideas. So, number one, I think this is a character that we're just going to find out more about. You know, whether that's him directly telling that to Sam or telling it to somebody, right? I feel like we're just going to find, okay, well, you have to kind of bridge the gap between 1 and 2, so that's 11 months, but we also know time is kind of a little bit different, you know, depending on where you are. So him on the beach is a little bit different than him, you know, just in the living world. In fact, it can be very, very different. So this man could have been locked up technically, or so to speak, right, for a very, very long time. That might have changed him, you know, in some ways. Now, in terms of what we've seen of him so far, he clearly is a villain, or just say like an opposing force to Sam, at least to start, okay? But this kind of goes to, I would say, prediction number 2. So 1, we're going to find just more about him, whether it's the time in between 1 and 2, but also maybe filling in some of the gaps of his youth. And I guess part 3 to that is what he wants now. Is it simply revenge? Is it simply to finish what he wanted to start in the first game? Or has things changed now, right? Because like the extinction has shifted. Like Amelie might not play a part at all in this game. It might be a new extinction entity. How does that change Higgs, right? What is his end goal in Death Stranding 2? That's something that I feel like he's going to have to kind of say early on. I guess it can be prolonged and, you know, explained over like 50 hours, but I wonder, because of the next prediction, if he's actually going to turn. You know, this is a character that, again, is so popular, and I'm not saying you do it because he's popular. I'm saying you do it because this is a chance to really delve into his character, right? Like, this is a guy that I wonder if he comes around, and because it's like, is there no saving anybody in these worlds? Probably not. That's, you know, normally that's not true with these type of games. Normally there can be redemption arcs, or at least there's reasons why people do all of the things that they do. Now, he kind of already had reasons, you know, in the first game, but maybe now how he actually comes to the light. Now, this might happen, it might not happen, because one thing, actually, we were told two specific things in the presentation, like on the Sunday after Summer Game Fest. Two things stood out to me, okay? They talked to Troy Baker a lot about Higgs, and they talked to Kojima a lot about him, and they said two things. One thing Kojima said specifically is he knew people, had fun, like, going after him, right? Like, fighting him in Death Stranding 1, and we're going to do that triple as much now. So, whether that literally means 3 times as much, or we are literally just going to have more interactions with this guy, right? Whether it's fighting him, we might have more battles. Maybe, like, every time he summoned a BT against us in the first game, now we just fight him. Like, who knows, like how it actually plays out. But that was really interesting to me, where it's like, all right, I think we're going to see him more often. And whether you fight him more often, or maybe you fight him very often in the beginning, and then he actually turns around, right? We'll have to see how that goes. But he also said, I think, it was one of the two. It might have been Troy Baker. They actually said by the end of learning about him, because they said that we're going to learn a little bit more about him and go to places that we didn't go in the first game. They actually ended that statement by talking about you might potentially cry. I think that was actually the line that they said. So it's like, all right, there it is right there, right? There's my at least hint or clue that they're either going to give us enough info on this guy that we're going to feel so bad that we get emotional, or if you want to stretch a little bit further, is this a guy that we learn about, maybe also get emotional, but then he turns on the good side, and then maybe he does some sort of sacrifice thing, right? Because I could see that, and honestly, that would be pretty emotional too, because it's like, okay, you understand him, you got him to like see the light, he's on your side now, and then he kind of does like that ultimate sacrifice. Either one of those options I do think would be like an emotional journey. So I wonder, and I don't know, like, what other reason would you cry or have tears over a character like Higgs unless those things don't happen? So I'm just wondering, that right there. And I guess the final thing I want to throw out, this is actually connected to the ESRB rating, right, of this game. So, it got rated. That's not necessarily anything new. But in the rating, it talks about us as players being able to use the guitar. Now, what's interesting is, of course, you watch the trailer, he uses the guitar against that samurai, right? And so I guess one of two things can happen here, right? Well, two main things, and it can actually branch off into many, many more things after that. But one is we take the guitar from Higgs. Now, okay, that's like solidified number one. How you get the guitar could be 1,000 different ways. You know what I mean? He could give it to you willingly. He could not give it to you willingly, right? You could pick it up off his dead body, like whatever happens. But number one, we as players, as Sam, we get the guitar, okay? Or we play as Higgs at some point in this game. Now, the ESRB rating just says that you use the guitar, right? It doesn't specifically say Sam Porter Bridges, uses the guitar. So, I mean, I imagine it is Sam. Okay, if I were to do like an actual prediction, I think Sam gets the guitar in some way. And it could, really the most anticlimactic way is just beating him in a fight and taking the guitar. And that might happen. And they could still, I'm sure, based off what we've seen, it'll still be freaking epic. But I mean, it probably would be the most anticlimactic way to actually be able to play as him, maybe through some like flashback sequence or something, or just to be able to experience the guitar. And that, see, the guitar is like the conduit, because like we know we're gonna have it, so it's like, okay, how do you get there, right? And that's, I think, the more interesting part. So I don't know, I don't think we would play as him. You think about the first game, it's like you're playing as Sam. That's it. I mean, this game, like, some of the cast has been shuffled. I almost wonder if you're gonna play as Elle Fanning's character tomorrow at some point. But like, is there a better likelihood at playing as different characters in this game versus the first game? I think yes. And by the way, I would say yes in the way of like Ellie in the first Last of Us game, right? Where it's like you play as Sam 85-90% of the game, and then 10% as like a twist that you don't really see coming, you play as somebody else. I'm not saying like each chapter you play as a different person. Like, I understand the type of game that this is, but I do wonder if there ever was a time to switch characters for whatever story reason, I wonder if this is the game to do it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I feel like we're going to see a more human Higgs, even though he's wilder, it seems like, now than he ever has been, right? So it's maybe going to be harder to connect with him, but maybe easier depending on what they say. But he is, when I think about this game, tomorrow is easily the most interesting character, because I kind of feel like it's Lou as an adult form, and we'll talk about that in future videos. That one is the most intriguing for like story implications, and we've heard so much about how good Fragile is in this game that gets me excited. But Higgs is easily, I'd say, top 3, where it's like, all right, what do you got planned for this guy, right? Because I think it's going to be bigger than what you did in the first game. So Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.